Good day, everyone, and welcome to our conversation, I'd like to say, about understanding talent intelligence, what to look for, and how to choose. I'm really glad to have join us today David Francis, Global Head of Research at Talent Tech Labs, a long-standing research house that has been specializing and expert and renowned in the area of technologies as they pertain to talent. I'll be kind of the pseudo host today. My name is Michael Dunn. I'm a director of product marketing here at Eightfold AI. We already had a question asking if the slide deck will be made available. And my understanding is yes to that question. I do strongly believe with like 90% certainty that we will be sharing the deck because we very much appreciate you joining us today. There's a lot of exciting research. There's a lot of great ideas. We'll be taking polls. We'll be trying to take questions from the audience. And so we want both the recording and the deck available because we're here to help you in these times that can be exciting, but also maybe a little bit like, don't know when it comes to how we can apply these innovation and technologies around the area of work, HR, and talent. Now, our focus here is on, talent intelligence, and Eightfold helped pioneer the AI-based native talent intelligence platform. We're actually in our 10th year. And what I want to say here is what our perspective is on talent intelligence. And the big thing, I think, is the ability to dynamically understand your talent needs, what the market offers for needs across all stages of the talent lifecycle. And so what this comes into play means having ability to apply purpose-built AI insights, have a platform then that can support automation, utilizing data that could be across the organization, market data, as well as ongoing data captured from your operations. And finally, data that comes with working with supporting the AI. Because when you have AI, you're also having data. The other part is just to leave for folks, along with our perspective about what talent intelligence means, is also what does AI mean? And we're seeing a lot of change. We're seeing a lot of concerns out there. There is talk of regulation and a little more than talk of regulation, say like with the European Union. And what we'd say is when you're looking at this space and people keep saying AI, and I had someone joking about that when they went to HR Tech, they said, all I heard about was AI, is to see and take into account your thoughts about having a framework in place for responsible AI from day one. So at Eightfold, with our talent intelligence platform, that's what we did. We worked with a lot of the certifications and compliance that many of you may know, from the ISO, GDPR for Europe. But then there are others, such as now the ISO 42001, which is around AI management systems, how are AI products developed, how they consume resources, how it's used. Others include often work with, say, like government agencies in terms of how your cloud business works. But along with compliance, along with like audits, it really should be thinking is, if we're bringing the AI from day one, are we really using the right data so that we get objective results? Are they the right algorithms that allow transparency, explainability? Are we enabling the right evaluations? Are we able to do the evaluations at scale? Are we able to have other parties do it? And then are there the right products in place for mitigating bias and ensuring objectivity? I think everyone wants to say when we have recommendations and matches, we want them to be fair and objective as much as possible. So it's a little bit of a crusade of mine, but it's that with AI and AI driving things like the talent intelligence platform is also to think from the start, being responsible AI by design. Now, with regards to my organization, we are now in our 10th year. It is a Silicon Valley-based firm that started with AI experts and teams for helping essentially both the employees, job seekers, citizens, et cetera, find the right career in the world. And on the flip side of that is helping enabling employer networks make the right decisions about employment. So we support multinational firms, public sector, We're active in 155 countries, support over 30 languages. By language support, we don't just mean the UI, we also mean parsing, we also mean understanding the skills and how those languages use, whether it's France, Germany, Japan, etc., and also involved in 19 countries, or 19 industries. But the main purpose is to enable a step change in how people approach their talent concerns, whether it's talent acquisition, talent management, resource management, contingent hiring, etc. And it's enabled step changes with whether very complex organizations, whether you're multinational, whether actually you're a public sector organization or a philanthropy, and regardless of the industry that you're in, whether it's industrial, whether it's in finance, whether it's in life sciences, etc. So just kind of wanted to give a quick snapshot of Eightfold, where we came from and where our thinking is as it applies to talent intelligence platforms, responsible AI, and how this could be applied in various markets, industry segments, and the type of outcomes that we hope to support. Following this introduction, I actually would want to hand over the soapbox, so to speak, to our esteemed guest, David Francis, and let him then be able to share a lot of exciting research that they've been capturing over the past 6 months.
Awesome.
David,
thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. Appreciate that. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and delighted to be here and join you all today. Before we jump into the content, thought maybe I would just spend a minute to let you know who I am and who our organization is. So, I'll be talking for, the next half hour or so about, some of the trends we're seeing in the space and thoughts on, strategy and the technology market. And it's always useful, I think, to have a little bit of background on kind of what's informing that lens or that particular perspective. So I'm the head of research at Talentech Labs. Been there about 6 years. We're a research organization focused exclusively on talent technology. And so we've evaluated at this point, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 different vendors in the space. We have 3 practice areas, started in talent acquisition and now service talent management and the contingent workforce. But I would say kind of our unique special sauce is that we're exclusively focused on, work-related technology. And all of kind of our research and insights, we were actually founded by practitioners, and kind of our insights and our research and kind of how we deliver are kind of designed or crafted through the lens of the practitioner. So, our mission is to help organizations kind of improve their talent function, via better use of technology, and kind of everything we do, is kind of around that. So hopefully that gives a little bit of perspective on us. And with that, we can kind of jump in. The way we've organized our time here together, we're going to start with a bit of, what I'll describe as a talent intelligence primer, where we'll work through kind of some kind of high-level drivers, some background information, kind of definitional stuff. How do you actually define talent intelligence? And then, where does it show up inside of an organization's tech stack, or where might it show up inside of an organizational tech stack, and where might you go to kind of purchase these kinds of capabilities, and what are kind of the implications for the broader team and organizational infrastructure, and then we'll look at kind of some persona-based use cases and et cetera. And we're going to shift gears a little bit, but talk a little bit about kind of what's coming down the horizon or what's around the corner with AI, and in particular agentic AI, and what that means for kind of the organization at large, and how this is coming to market, and what it means for talent practitioners. And then we'll end, kind of time permitting, with a bit more fireside chat discussion with Michael, and happy to answer any questions that you all might have as well. Feel free to pose questions at any time. I think we also have a couple of polls kind of baked in here, so hopefully that all goes smoothly. Before we jump into kind of a deep discussion of talent intelligence in particular, I thought it would be useful to just share a couple of data points, kind of highlighting the macroeconomic maybe drivers behind this type of solution, kind of as a category. This here is from our friends over at PwC. This is a CEO survey that they ran last year. And besides being what I think is a beautiful data visualization, it also illustrates a pretty interesting dynamic, which I think is true, or most organizations are experiencing right now. What they did is they asked for organizations in their survey that had, provided the primary industry that they operate in. They asked what new industries are you, or what other industries are you expanding into? And the net of it is that, more than half of organizations are expanding into new industries outside of kind of their primary or historical industry. And so if you've ever heard the sentence, everybody is becoming a technology company, well, this data gives some credence to that statement. As you can see, kind of the number one kind of inflows in industry is technology. But this is true across the board. And so kind of across the economy, car manufacturers or traditional car manufacturers are now getting into electric vehicles. Technology companies themselves are oftentimes, vertically integrating or expanding into the industries which historically they've sold to. And so I think the kind of net here is that the pace of change is accelerating. And, when organizations are expanding into new businesses, into new markets, and they need to hire and staff those businesses and markets and figure out, what their workforce mix is, or maybe they're shutting units down. All of that lends itself to being able to understand, kind of workforce dynamics much more agilely, and talent intelligence is a tool to help support those types of decisions. Second data point is actually from a survey that we ran. We did this earlier this year in partnership with Unleash, where we surveyed more than 280 organizations, talent leaders. We asked a lot of different questions. We're a research company, so we love surveys. But one of the questions we asked is on the organizations or leaders' top challenges. And if you look at these top four here in particular, I think it's notable that all four basically are challenges that lend themselves to being solved via talent intelligence type capabilities. And so retaining critical talent, applicant quality, the economy, or responding to business uncertainty, which I suspect many of my U.S. Counterparts might be dealing with right now with the recently signed executive order on H-1Bs, if my phone call and email is any indication, and then keeping up with changing skills requirements. And so, again, each of these are areas that are in part addressed by talent intelligence capabilities. The last data point here is from our friends at McKinsey, which did a pretty robust analysis looking at basically trying to quantify the economic impact of talent strategies, and in particular of suboptimal talent strategies. And the main point to make here is that, talent strategies or talent intelligence isn't necessarily just kind of like a feel-good exercise, that you go through, but there's a real kind of economic value or cost associated with either getting this right or getting it wrong. The net of the study was that they found for the median-sized S&P 500 organization, they were leaving something like $500 million in productivity on the table due to suboptimal talent strategies. And they quantified these in four areas: lack of skills, lack of engagement, inefficiency, and attrition, and vacancies. So the net here, your talent strategy, matters quite a bit. How you tackle that matters quite a bit. Getting it right has a real economic, value to it, and talent intelligence can contribute to making sure that talent strategy is correct. All right, with the preface out of the way, now we can actually dive into our discussion of talent intelligence in particular. And what I've observed is that talent intelligence is one of these terms where if you ask 20 different people what does it mean, you tend to get kind of 20 different answers. If you ask a vendor what it means, it tends to be what product do I have to actually sell. If you ask a practitioner, it can be all over the place. So this is our definition, which I'll share here, and I'm going to use to kind of frame the rest of the conversation. Talent intelligence is the process of collecting and analyzing people data, which includes things like skills, capabilities, and even things like experiences, talent ambitions, and actual kind of work activities and work output in order to improve talent acquisition, development, retention, as well as inform better talent strategies. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but I've tried to kind of illustrate it here on the bottom. And what this is illustrating is at most organizations, there are many different kind of talent systems in play or people systems in play that are data generators, which means they're generating data on, on the workforce. And so at the highest level, you have, your HRIS, which is, typically their people system of record. You have learning tools, which might be, a learning management system or a learning experience platform, which capture, metadata on the courses and also data on the individuals that are taking those courses, how well they're doing on them, and possibly even some, kind of ambition type data. You have talent marketplaces or internal career sites, which might suggest directionally, where people want to move internally, possibly compensation platforms, performance measurement tools. So all of these different systems are generating data. And, what a talent intelligence platform does is it basically aggregates all of this up into, together, it puts an AI layer on top of it to help, talent practitioners make decisions or make good decisions or better decisions using that data. And if you, just listen to the, the different systems kind of I talked about, or that are represented here, what you'll notice is that they aren't siloed in one particular function. And so talent intelligence shouldn't be siloed just in talent acquisition. And it's not just a talent acquisition capability. It shouldn't just be siloed in talent management. And it's not just a talent management activity. Talent intelligence kind of as a function really should span, an organization's entire kind of talent function and capabilities. Now, where these different systems that generate data kind of come from, obviously are across these different silos. But the idea here is that you're aggregating all of this information up and then making it meaningful to you, the practitioners or the team that needs it, kind of regardless of where they sit in the talent function. And now we have a chance. So here we go, our first polling question. So with that, with the definition out of the way, maybe we can use this as an opportunity to get a chance to let you all respond. Where is maybe a self-rating here? How mature is your organization's use of talent intelligence technology? Give you a moment to respond to this. And then we'll move here. And it looks like nobody is using it, or the question didn't come through. All right, so not one person has any experience with talent intelligence technology. Well, if that is true, then this is wonderful. This should be a good educational opportunity for you. One more question, which is, what's the biggest challenge your organization faces in implementing talent intelligence strategies? There might be an issue because I don't think I see anybody actually submitting. So yeah. Anyhow, I guess something we'll have to figure out. If those responses come through, maybe we can go back or send them as a post follow-up to the webinar here. I wanted to show this just to talk through. So if you think from an organization like a buyer's perspective, where do you actually go to market to get kind of talent intelligence capabilities? So you're sold kind of on the concept of okay, this is interesting, but where do you actually go to get these capabilities? This is our talent acquisition technology ecosystem. This is one of 3 that we produce, which is kind of our lens on all the different solutions that are available to be purchased by talent teams. This is the talent acquisition one in particular. We organize it by stage, so this kind of mirrors the flow that a candidate goes through in the journey from source, engage, select, hire. And then if you look at the bottom, there are these kind of color codings, and the color codings are what we call verticals, which are sets of related solutions, which are tools that kind of have a common DNA, even if they don't necessarily kind of compete directly with each other. And then inside of every bubble, or subvertical as we call it, are companies that tend to have similar feature sets, similar products and features, and tend to show up in competitive RFPs as an example. If you look at the light blue area, we actually have a vertical for talent intelligence, and we include in there matching systems and labor market intelligence. And I think by extension, I would probably also say that hiring analytics and people search, which are basically kind of external people search engines, would be here as well. And the common DNA that these platforms share is that they typically are using AI trained on a fairly substantial amount of data in order to either surface insights or inform decisions. And so with matching, it's a decision of how well does a particular candidate's background, skill set, and work history match to a particular organization's job function and role that they're hiring for. Or in the labor market intelligence case, it's kind of more macro labor market supply demand trends, compensation, and skills intelligence. Now, it's not as simple as this, even though this is already kind of complicated, because how the market has developed is that there are many solutions which basically have a kind of a user-facing product, which is in a different category, but they've also added on or built in elements of talent intelligence to the platform. And so, as an example, a company that sells a CRM, might have talent intelligence capability as part of their product, even though kind of what they're selling is a CRM. Or maybe on the talent management side, there's a company that's selling an internal talent marketplace, but they also, as kind of part of their full platform, it includes talent intelligence capabilities. So all this is to say is that these solutions right now, is kind of they're sold on the market, tend to be in relatively, kind of a verticalized fashion, or to kind of cover a piece of talent intelligence, but it's not necessarily like that, kind of talent intelligence that we talked about, a couple slides ago, where it's covering kind of the end-to-end, talent function. It tends to be more kind of a discrete or bespoke piece of talent intelligence for a specific use case or function. So with that, maybe I'll give you a couple of thoughts on kind of guiding principles towards navigating the solution space here a little bit, and key considerations, particularly as you're getting down into kind of evaluating specific vendors and all of that fun stuff. The first maybe call out would be the ability for a system to integrate or read data from multiple systems. As we said earlier, for kind of the more kind of data a system can take in, ingest, and make sense of, kind of the more value it's going to be kind of across use cases. And so, generally, if you were trying to have a system of talent intelligence, generally the more systems that you can integrate with and read data from and have that data become kind of meaningfully useful to you, the better. The ability to use kind of the same system or intelligence engine for multiple use cases, generally the more that you can capture under the same umbrella, typically the better. Now what I'll say, and we'll look at kind of the persona-based use cases here in a bit. I don't know if there's a single system that's going to do kind of everything for every stakeholder today, but generally kind of the more bundled you can get one of these solutions to the extent they can actually execute against those use cases that you're looking at, the better. And then last is the ability to kind of calibrate to organizational context. And we're going to talk about kind of AI in particular here in just a moment. But for these systems to be useful, oftentimes, every organization is unique and every team is unique, every individual is unique. And so there's this kind of this concept of, needing to use AI to kind of almost automated scale, but then hyper personalize kind of locally. And so what that means in practice is, kind of any system you are taking a look at, you should understand its ability to kind of calibrate to organizational context or make, decisions based on specific organizational context, as opposed to something that's just, maybe coming off the shelf. And then the last we've already kind of talked about already, but just the fact that talent intelligence as a function spans, all three areas and shouldn't be kind of, tackled in a vacuum. So this is probably a good chance to pivot a little bit to a quick talk of artificial intelligence, and I'm going to spare everyone the technical the technical details here, and kind of the 70-year history of AI and how we got to where we are today. I'll spend a little bit of time later talking about how kind of LLMs are different than traditional models and what that means. But for the time being, I just want to give kind of a high-level overview of kind of how AI is using these systems, why it's used, and what it should be used for, and maybe what it shouldn't be used for. So first and foremost, first and foremost, like what is AI and what's it kind of good for? Every form of AI, from the most kind of basic simple algorithm to kind of the most advanced kind of leading large language model on the cutting edge of kind of theoretical research, basically all do the same thing. They're prediction engines, and so they're taking some input and then making a prediction for what should come next, what word should come next, what decisions should be made, et cetera. And so what it's really good at is inferring relationships and then learning over time. And so as new data is fed into a system, one kind of byproduct of AI-based systems is that they tend to improve over time with use, with calibration, and with feedback. They're typically pre-trained on a large data set and then fine-tuned on an ongoing basis. And then, I would describe them as a decision orchestrator. And what I mean by this is, if you're thinking about kind of talent intelligence at scale, like actually AI is kind of like the only way that you can really do this at scale. What a lot of organizations have done, many organizations now have talent intelligence functions, and they have teams of data scientists, which are basically maybe have already done step one of kind of aggregating data, and then they're doing different types of queries against that data in order to try to answer questions that they're getting from their business leaders or their talent partners. And that is one approach you could take. But really, if you want to do this kind of at scale, it's kind of the only way to do it. And the reason is it's good at a few different things. It's really good at predicting. AI is really good at synthesizing information. That is, going into a large kind of data set and really simplifying down to kind of the Cliff Notes version of it, so to speak. It's extremely good at discovering relationships or making inferences, particularly for data points that might be so disparate, analyzing billions of different data points, like that you wouldn't even be able to find that relationship kind of existed or know that relationship existed. And good at informing. And informing is unique from deciding, which is an important distinction. And so in our view, it's possible, in fact, and some organizations do set kind of risk tolerances at which they'll let AI-driven systems make decisions, based on different kind of decision criteria, or again, risk thresholds. But we would say, as a best practice, organizations should use AI to inform decisions, but not to make decisions. And so as a human is kind of involved in the loop, making some type of a talent decision, an AI can inform that decision with additional data, additional context, and additional insight. But since we live in a regulated industry, and I would say in an increasingly regulated industry, it probably should not be deciding any information without human oversight or input into those particular those decisions. And the last point here is, because kind of AI is kind of a capability is so important to talent intelligence capabilities, broadly speaking. If you're kind of going to market and evaluating, talent intelligence platforms or talent intelligence capabilities, and you're looking at different vendors, understanding the kind of ins and outs of how its AI works is actually critically important. It's arguably one of the biggest, maybe deciding factors, in addition to kind of the specific use cases it enables, and obviously the user experience. But this is a critically important capability for talent intelligence, and so understanding how a specific vendor, does all these things under the hood, incredibly important from a decision support perspective. All right, let's give this another shot and see if this actually works this time. How mature is your organization's talent function regarding AI? Give it a few seconds. And it looks like, again, I'm not seeing any submissions come through. So again, I'll just assume the polling questions aren't working quite as expected. All right, wanted to provide this here as a different lens on talent intelligence. In particular, this is what we've seen kind of in practice, how these capabilities tend to, kind of either boil up in an organization or perhaps trickle down, tends to be based on, kind of the persona or the end use case that's, being designed, or the different stakeholder that's kind of being designed for or sold to. And at the fundamental level, the same kind of intelligence engine could power all of these different experiences that we see here on the slide. A lot of it just tends to be on kind of, product focus and, vendor's decision on kind of what market and how they want to go to market and what market they kind of want to serve. But in theory, the underlying kind of AI or talent intelligence infrastructure that powers, the leaders or strategic level could also power the kind of employee experience as well. But what tends to happen is that different personas kind of want different things from a talent intelligence platform, from a capability perspective. For the C-suite, they tend to be interested, obviously, in kind of the most strategic stuff. And so, they're interested in how do we compare to our competitors? Are we in the right markets? What markets should we be moving to? Where should we be expanding? Do we have the right skill sets kind of holistically and to win today and in the future? Do we have the right talent strategy overall? Are we optimally using our talent? And so the kind of the quote unquote products that are, designed to serve this particular persona tend to be a lot more kind of strategic and analytics focused. So things like internal and external analytics and labor market intelligence and kind of workforce, possibly like workforce planning tools. One layer down, you have kind of CHROs and talent leaders that are still interested in the strategic, but a little bit more, kind of how do we operationalize this stuff and start driving actual talent strategies. And so they're interested in things like what are our workforce needs? How are we going to fill those gaps? How do we become an employer of choice? How do we identify high potential talent, which might be internal or external? How do we bring in that right talent, externally? And how do we upskill and reskill our workforce, which is becoming kind of increasingly important as job descriptions are changing as kind of a result of AI taking over maybe some of the more automatable or mundane parts of our work. And so this tends to be, an analytics flavor here too, but also kind of an execution component of it. And so it's, the quote unquote products are things like workforce planning, skills analytics, intelligent recommendations, and then kind of the systems of activation like the ATS, the CRM, vendor management system, et cetera. The next two are, the manager and the employee, and this is much core kind of human level led. And so managers, most interested in kind of their scope of or view of the world. And so, what skills do they have on themselves or on their team? What skills do they need on their team? How are they going to identify people that they may be hiring for, either inside the organization or outside the organization? How can they help their employees grow, personally in their role currently and also into their next role? And how can, teams be organized better to actually get work done? And so from a product perspective, it's things like succession planning, team analytics, opportunity marketplace, learning assignment, and hiring tools. And employees largely interested in their own kind of development in relationship to the employer. And so it's things like, how does the employee find their next opportunity? How can they develop themselves internally and grow themselves professionally? Who can they connect with at the organization that might be a mentor? How can they upskill themselves? And so these are things like Learning Navigator, career exploration, intelligent job search, and then mentorship and community. Now, there might be some companies that are saying they have all of these things in one platform. I actually don't think that is the case yet. I don't think anybody has kind of fully cracked the nut across the board. But from an organizational perspective, kind of thinking through what the use case is or the driver for some of these capabilities that you're looking at can help kind of inform, which particular kind of category of tool might be better, which particular individual vendor based on their kind of relative strengths or weaknesses in any of these particular areas. All right, move us forward. Lest, actually I can move myself forward, forgive me. There we go. Lest we think this is all kind of pie in the sky, theoretical or ivory castle theoretical exercises. There is this is kind of a real, a real trend. As I said already, many organizations already have or are building out a talent intelligence function internally as part of their overall talent team. Many are investing in technology to support that function. What I want to call out here, this is an example of an organization's talent intelligence function. What I think is nice here is they've kind of articulated the overarching mission of the function and then kind of the core kind of areas that it's going to influence or decisions that it's going to influence. And so the mission of the TI function, things like analyze and translate business needs, identify critical skills and talent gaps, support workforce planning, contribute to the annual operating plan, develop function specific talent insights, And then if you look at kind of its relationship to the broader organization, again, you'll notice that it's not just in talent acquisition, not just for hiring strategies or, better sourcing tools, et cetera. It's not just in talent management for, slightly better, internal mobility programs. It's really across the entire organization, from, the HR team to talent acquisition, even insight into mergers and acquisitions. And that's how that's going to, influence workforce design, org design, and strategy. And so, maybe I think one of the nice things that this particular organization has done is actually define kind of a mission statement or driving kind of purpose for the function. And, it's easy to get kind of starry-eyed about shiny technology. But as you're thinking about talent intelligence, something you can do as an organization is write down kind of a mission statement for yourself and a set of kind of North Stars that are going to be important for you to accomplish, which again, having that kind of framework and roadmap in place is going to make it much easier as you're going to market and assessing kind of different solutions that can contribute to, an ecosystem or a technology provider that's going to support that particular function. All right, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on skills here, and this is not meant to be a skills presentation, but the reason is skills is an incredibly important part, or like one of the most important part of the kind of the foundational data sources for many talent intelligence platforms. It's kind of a atomic unit of data that is used kind of in many different systems. And so I want to talk a little bit about, just basically how to maybe think about skills in a more effective manner than maybe they've traditionally been leveraged at organizations. So the main point I want to make here is if you think about like what is a skill, it's really just a piece of text. And so it's a string of text. Like if I, was say searching for somebody I wanted to hire, and I put in research as, a skill I was looking for, well, this doesn't tell me like a whole lot. It doesn't have, it doesn't tell me what type of research that somebody I was looking for was doing. It's, was it academic? Was it at a private institution, a public institution? Was it quantitative or qualitative? Was that, a market research firm? There's all these kind of things that isn't included along with this piece of text. And so the main point I want to make is that kind of skills in a vacuum are kind of meaningless. And for skills to have value or be useful in different decision-making kind of engines or paradigms, really skills need to be kind of married to some kind of organizational context that kind of enriches what it is that you're actually saying. And so in this particular case, you'd probably also want to kind of know the industry that skill is associated with, the type of organization, the experiences that generated that skill, and probably a proficiency. And you might even want to know a little bit about like what are that particular candidate's like aspirations, and in an internal context, to the extent that you had this data already, maybe even some data associated with some of the outcomes or performance of the use of that particular skill. And so one of the I guess kind of maybe things to think about as you're evaluating talent intelligence platforms is the extent to which maybe new data or context can be added, or the extent to which a tool that you're evaluating can actually kind of like understand and adapt to your own kind of unique organizational context, because just skills kind of by themselves in a vacuum, in my view, leave a little bit to be desired. Just another illustration of kind of how this all might come together in this particular case, showing kind of an example data flow diagram, possibly for using to actually kind of inform job architecture, and it's showing kind of different sources of skills, where those are coming from, different systems that they might ingest with to kind of give an overall sense of compensation and how some of these things relate to each other. Maybe different competencies or that you might have internally, unique to your own organization. Alternate career paths that might be associated with a particular job title, et cetera. And then wanted to share this here kind of as it relates to skills. There's been, for the past several years, there's been quite a bit of, I would say, kind of organizational momentum or interest in skills, and not without merit. There's a, again, it's kind of the foundational, data point powering a lot of different new solutions. And the way it's come to market, there's kind of a broad variety of solutions. And so what we've done here is kind of organize these by, do they tend to be kind of organization-wide integrated solutions on the x-axis versus kind of more point solution focused, and kind of what's the probability of success of any of these particular initiatives, from kind of low success to higher success. I want to be clear here, this isn't like super duper scientific, but it's meant to be illustrative of like what we've seen at clients that have pursued, many of these strategies and initiatives, in general, kind of what's been more successful or less successful. And where we've seen kind of most success is in the upper area with things like, using skills for things like skills architecture, skills-based hiring, job design, skills-based learning and development, and upskilling programs. And then in the lower section, there's been some, there's been some interesting examples of companies that have done, great work in these areas, but, maybe a little bit more challenging to roll out kind of universally. Things like skills-based compensation, gig marketplaces, skills-based workforce planning, which kind of necessitates an entire kind of rethinking of, traditional kind of job design and how hiring and workforce management actually gets done. And so probably because they're just a little bit bigger in scope, tend to be a little bit more challenging to fully kind of operationalize as well. And the last slide I'll leave here on skills is related to, I think ultimately when we look at talent intelligence and when we look at, kind of skills as part of that, ultimately, I think what organizations are trying to do is increase workforce agility. And it gets back to kind of the very first slide we had where the workforce is changing kind of faster than ever and the economy is changing faster than ever. And so ultimately what we're trying to improve here as organizations is workforce agility. We see that as a function of, understanding the jobs and work to be done, using technology to disintermediate kind of the task and understand the skills and tasks that are, required to actually, do that work, and then redesigning it in a more optimal fashion via some combination of the below, kind of Lego pieces. You can build, which is basically to leverage your workforce internally to upskill or reskill. You can buy, which is basically to go out to the market and either hire people or recruit them into your organization. You can borrow, which is using contingent labor in some capacity to for typically short-term needs or maybe longer-term needs that you're kind of building capabilities around. You can bot, which is basically automating the workforce, which is using automation and AI, to automate historically manual processes. Or you can bundle, which is basically, offshoring different parts of work to different global delivery centers, around the world. And so maybe setting up teams in different geographical locations. And given number 4 here, bot, we think is going to become increasingly relevant and already having an impact on the workforce. We thought maybe it's a good kind of transition point to talk a little bit about the impact of AI and agents on the workforce. We've just published what I think is a groundbreaking report on this particular topic, looking at AI and agents in the workforce, covering kind of the vendors in play, the adoption, and kind of our thoughts on client strategy. We don't have time to go through the whole thing, and so we're going to kind of quickly run through some of the high-level findings with some strategic maybe takeaways to think about. And I don't believe these are working, so I'm going to go ahead and skip those. But here we are. So what are agents? This is a concept that didn't really exist 18 months ago, and now this is seemingly all we can hear about now. I'll start here with maybe just a high-level kind of a gross oversimplification of kind of how kind of today's AI or agents are different than the AI solutions that we've had kind of historically, and with kind of differentiating how this has evolved kind of quite rapidly, actually. Historically, all of AI, broadly speaking, not just in the talent space, but broadly speaking, were bespoke models, which basically mean you would train an algorithm on some specific data set or, maybe multiple data sets for kind of one specific purpose. And in the talent space, I use Textio as kind of my quintessential example. I actually love Textio, by the way. It's a great company. For those of you who don't know, they do job description optimization, particularly to make sure that your job descriptions are more inclusive and you're not inadvertently knocking out underrepresented candidates. But the way that they built that model is they trained it on lots of job descriptions and trained it for this one particular use case. Large language models, which launched around 2022, kind of changed the game because instead of needing kind of a specific model for a specific purpose, they have kind of one model that does everything, trained on all of human knowledge, and it's kind of a general expert across domains. And the net result of this is that it kind of democratized access to AI, and it made it significantly cheaper to kind of leverage AI for a variety of different applications. And so one of the reasons we're seeing kind of an explosion of new solutions and new vendors is because now there's much lower access to kind of the greatest AI that the world's ever known at a relatively affordable price point. Now, the kind of latest evolution of this is what we'll call kind of multimodal AI workers or agents. And the kind of distinction here is this is basically a capability that's built on large language model kind of technology, but is unique in the fact that it's typically given systems access. And so it kind of can operate inside of the systems that everybody uses to actually run their business. And it can actually take on work. I think of this as kind of like AI or conversationally enabled like RPA. If you think back to like what kind of traditional RPA was, where you're kind of automating swivel chair tasks, kind of agents or AI is doing a lot of that work, except enabled with this kind of conversational AI capability, which now has kind of broad domain expertise across many different applications. And by the way, has the ability to do things like natural sounding voice and video. So that's a kind of a high level what these are. This shows kind of a breakdown or a little bit of the difference between AI and agentic AI. I'll spend maybe just a minute here running through kind of how the landscape is developed and what it means from kind of a practitioner's perspective. And I think kind of illustrates the evolving landscape of these tools fairly well, fairly succinctly. At the bottom level, you have all of the foundation model builders. These are the companies like OpenAI and Google and Meta that are building the world's kind of best large language models, investing tens of billions of dollars in training these models. In the middle layer, you have what's called AI infrastructure companies, and these are organizations that basically have kind of no-code agent builders. Or they leverage the foundation models, but then they make it easy for organizations to develop or deploy their own agents, whether that are vendors themselves like Eightfold, or whether that are organizations that kind of want to take a more active role in developing agents themselves. And then at the top, you have all of the different vendor kind of point solutions that have an agentic experience, which have been built using some combination of kind of the bottom two rungs of this particular staircase. And the way that this is organized tends to be kind of by application or point solution. And so what we've observed is these have kind of coalesced in a few different areas. AI recruiters, which tend to be sort of talent acquisition teams, which automate parts or all of the recruiting process or talent coordination process. AI workers, which take on segments of work, which tends to be verticalized by occupation. And AI coaching, which tends to be sold to talent management teams, which is for kind of role-based or AI-based simulation for internal workers. So with that, like where's adoption at right now? It's a survey that we ran again earlier this year, where we asked organizations about their current adoption and their expected use of different kinds of AI. We asked about I'll share kind of two data points here. One question we asked about was just general kind of like co-pilots and, like, are you giving your employees access to generative AI tools? And here, more than half of organizations had done it. Another nearly 30% were planning to roll it out in the next 12 months. And so what I'll say is that, giving employees access to kind of a generative AI tool or a co-pilot at this point is kind of table stakes. And I would describe this as probably like small T transformation, where the way this has been rolled out in many organizations is, the capability is approved, and then it's kind of given to employees where it's like, okay, you go take this now and figure out what to do with it. And there has been some, some productivity gains on the back of this and some great use cases that have developed from it, but it hasn't necessarily like transformed organizations. And if you're thinking that you're, extremely innovative because your employees have access to, an AI tool, to help them do, some piece of their work. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. We also asked about digital workers augmenting or replacing team members. And so this was getting at, to what extent are people using AI workers or AI recruiters, et cetera. And this is, we think, will be a much more kind of transformational, trend that's going to happen over the next few years. About 24, or just under a quarter, 24% reported that they had either a pilot or something active today, with another just over 40% planning a pilot in the next 12 months. We've had the opportunity, since we've kind of published this, we've done some additional work with a number of clients. We've had kind of 6 months of labor data to observe. And what we've seen is there's already kind of several, we can already kind of see early impacts of this particular solution segment coming to market. And the big question that organizations kind of are struggling with right now is there are so many options. There's kind of an arms race from the vendor's end towards, kind of winning in this agentic space. And so from a practitioner's perspective, there's friction in understanding, what capabilities, should we use, and which specific kind of processes should we use? Where do we get those capability from? And then kind of the overall arching kind of governance structure for these solutions as well. All of this, kind of has yet to be kind of formally figured out at most organizations. And so it's kind of a work in progress. But what I will say is that we think this is coming, and I would I would encourage you all to kind of, go into this with kind of an eye towards this happening rather than not happening, and having an informed opinion. Because, as scary as this might sound, or might be in some respects, probably the worst outcome is not having any opinion and kind of totally outsourcing all the decision making to, say, the IT department, who's more than happy to run and make kind of all those decisions on your behalf. So there's going to be some, pretty significant implications for kind of the workforce overall, for how talent is managed, for how people are reskilled, for early career programs, for what specific parts of the actual, say, recruiting process or talent management process gets automated versus which pieces stay human. And so, as talent leaders, behooves you have kind of an informed opinion on this topic. And so I would just say to get yourself educated and have an informed opinion, because this is coming probably, whether we like it or not. All right, and with that, that wraps up my discussion. So, Mike, I'll see if there are maybe any questions, or we'll hand it back to you.
David, thank you very much for that thorough walkthrough on the landscape today in terms of the innovation, the AI, and talent intelligence, and how that's all brought together. And I think what we're seeing, a lot of the excitement and thinking out there with Global 2000 organizations, even public sector, mid-market, et cetera. I do think one thing was a point that came up was that AI, there's resistance to it because there's a feeling of risk aversion. Maybe it's the biggest reason holding companies back. So do you have some thoughts on that? I know I kind of gave our preamble of how from the start we believe in responsible by design AI, but we did want to see maybe you have some additional thoughts on that. We've always talked about that. I always say, hey, you got to get it right and then build on that. That's part of having the platform, is being the responsible AI piece.
Yeah, don't disagree. I think it's a good point. What I would say is that what I've observed is organizations, or many organizations, tend to kind of lump together in this, under AI, or what people think of as AI is actually this really kind of broad amorphous category, which includes a lot of stuff which isn't really AI. And so if from a risk aversion perspective, it kind of depends on the specific risk that you're talking about. The first thing that you'd want to make sure of if you're is just that is this actually AI that we're talking about, or is it a vendor trying to hype up what they've got kind of as AI? And then the second piece is for the specific use case that you're looking to use it for. You kind of want to know what are the legislation around that, And most larger companies that are selling to corporates, to larger corporates at this point, have already gone through some type of an AI bias audit test, and do so kind of on a continual basis to make sure that their algorithms aren't kind of inadvertently contributing to discriminatory hiring decisions, as an example. But you kind of just want to look on the use case. I would say over time, like I feel like AI in hiring. So my hypothesis is like over the next 5 years or so, like, and I think the kind of stuff that's happened with large language models has kind of been an accelerant. Like I think that AI is just going to become kind of a part of how talent functions are run. Now some of that's going to vary depending organization to organization, like in which specific areas. But I kind of liken it almost to like self-driving cars. If you look at the data in aggregate for self-driving cars, like I forget how much more performant they are, but it's like an order of magnitude safer than driving as a human if you measure it by like, whatever it is, deaths per 100,000 miles or accidents per 100,000 miles. And so at some point, it's almost like if you were, far enough down the road, or metaphorically, no pun intended, if you're far enough kind of in the future, if it becomes so much better at doing some of these things than a human, then there's almost a question of like, why would you kind of put yourself at risk? It's almost like the bigger risk is not leaning in. With hiring solutions, kind of in aggregate, I don't think we're quite near that. And so being thoughtful about how you evaluate the vendors that you're using and the use cases that you're doing are very important. But if you look at kind of best-in-class AI, versus what's physically capable in a human-only kind of function, I think even today, the scale's already tipped towards AI being, better.
Agree. It is just like there's so much data. What could be in terms of having effective, where the rubber meets the road with your talent strategy and having it work, just as we continue the road metaphor here. And I think actually it's a great point. I think with many people, if there is resistance, I think there's always look in the long term, but take small steps. I mean, because actually, as I said earlier, the AI that you're using, there should be in place around the algorithms, the data, the ability to audit it, to see the explainability, to see the results you're getting. And also, I think understanding if it's learning, like that's part of the AI is the system actually learning for the basis there. I think the other question that came in, which is interesting, if I interpret this right, it sounded like, is this all for big companies or does business size make a difference in terms of projections? I think, like, for example, our smaller organizations more, should they be hesitant about using this, or is it likely to be insured about using this in the future? So I'm interpreting that. Are we talking this for just big companies? Is there an ecosystem out there? Is there opportunity there for what might be a small to mid-size or smaller organizations? I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think
can extrapolate say whether like a 5,000 FTE and under type of organization.
Right. Yeah, I think I think the need. So when we got back to talking about like your talent intelligence function and what that should look like and kind of defining the North Star and the mission, I think the capability, broadly speaking, is going to be valuable kind of no matter what size you are, right? Because every organization are making talent decisions all the time. It's just that the kind of scale at which you're making those decisions and probably like the specific issues are going to be probably different if you're 100,000 global organization versus you're a 5,000 person organization somewhere in the Midwest. And so I do think it's broadly valuable. It's just that the specific kind of things that are most valuable or pieces of capability that are most valuable are probably going to be different as you get bigger or smaller.
Yes, and I also think your chart earlier back, I don't know if it's the equivalent of the ascent of man, but I think one of the elements that you're mentioning was these capabilities are being more democratizing. It's like that was one reason of the pickup for the generative AI was suddenly just your employee can go to a site and start asking questions. So I think for these needs that these type of capabilities are certainly be available. I think also people have worked around kind of the issues. I think earlier with AI, a big thing was getting enough of the data to start having to produce the kind of results you want. And I think there's a lot of approaches now where the training sets don't have to be a giant, big black box lab project for a giant multinational firm. There's a lot of work with the models and the data's underneath that could make that available to a broader audience, I think.
It's significantly easier to deploy for a smaller organization these days. You used to have to go train on, like, you'd find a population internally that you'd want to train on, and that only made sense if you had enough people internally, which kind of precluded it to being sold to large customers. And to Michael's point, that's not necessarily the case anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think 10 years ago, those type of projects were often described as consulting disguised as software. Not to sound, but you needed a lot of data scientists' effort to help tweak things and interpret. And then when you're like, wow, this is great, let's scale it, it's like, it's kind of a circumscribed lab project. Any final words of thoughts? I think we ran over a little, 2 minutes past, but David, any final?
Yeah, I'll say thank you to everyone. We actually had a couple of, I think there are a few people that had shared questions kind of in advance. I thought they were great discussion topics. Looks like we don't have time to get to them, but happy to maybe shoot a thought or response offline. Yeah, thank you for the team for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. Hope this was valuable, and hope it's useful as you're making decisions around your own team's talent function.
Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Apologies that we ran over a little bit, but we very much appreciate all the questions and engagement here. This session will be reposted for you to access. And as I said, I'm going to check, and I think I'm 90% sure that there will also be a deck available for you to have all the content to review in terms of what David went over and the research here that's been done at Talent Tech Labs. Again, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week.